Alright, talking about detail and plug wires and those things. Um, Before you take your pin vise and start wandering all over the place trying to find the right place for the hole, take a push pin, and I've sharpened this one so there's a nice little point on it, and now I'm going to push a hole so that my pin vise will have a guide where it should go. So I want one of the plug wires be right there, and then the other one to go in right there. See if you can see this, but right here you can see those two little guide holes. So now I can take my pin vise and insert the end of the bit into it, and my pin vise is not going to wander around all over the model. I'm going to just be able to drill my holes into the heads. Okay, so now I can just drill those out. So I will do that with all the pieces that I want to have some detail. Whether I take my rim and I make a little puncture there on the rim to where I can drill that out and put a valve stem in, or my door panel. If I want to make a little mark right here on top, push a little hole so I can drill down through that, that's what I do. And I go around the whole model and figure out all the holes that need to be drilled. Just like with the water pump assembly, I need to run a fuel line. Okay, so I'm going to grab this and I'm going to pop a hole right down here on the bottom of it so I can drill into it a little bit without wandering all over the place. So now I've got my little hole pushed right in here. Okay, and now I can start drilling a hole for the wire I want to use for the fuel line. And it's just gentle turning, getting all those things drilled out before you start getting too crazy with paint. So go around your model, drill your holes for what you want, and when you've got everything done, you've got to decide on wire. This is pretty good gauge wire for fuel line. I've got my wire that I'm going to probably use as my spark plug wire. I also have a smaller gauge silver wire that I use for different applications. Fuel line's a little thick for door locks, and so I use just a thinner gauge wire like this, just slightly thinner. It's hard to see the difference on camera, but you can tell this one I'll probably use for my door locks. Might use this one for my valve stems and those things. So go ahead and start drilling everything out, get everything marked, and then when that's all done, we will start putting some things together and get to making a distributor that I want to drill. I've drilled a hole in the top of the starter because I'm going to run the battery cable down to the starter. I've drilled holes, sanded that down, sanded the plastic wires off, and I've drilled holes into each end here so I can run the battery cables. I've drilled holes in my rims so that I can put in valve stems. I have the holes in the side of the heads of the engine block. I've taken the master cylinder here for the brakes and drilled holes so I can do brake lines. I've also drilled holes so I can run a wire over the top for the hold down. So I've got that. I've got the holes for the door locks. I've got that. Again, drilled the hole for the fuel line. I am soaking the carburetor to take the chrome off of that because I just don't see many chrome carburetors. So now that I've got all these holes drilled, I think I have everything taken care of. I want to start on my distributor so that I can run the wire. So here's the distributor for the kit. Notice it has a vacuum advance on it. So we'll be cutting that off, putting that on our homemade distributor. So I'm going to take my tubing, which is slightly larger than this, but that since it sits behind, sits to the back of this engine, that won't be a big deal. So I've taken a piece of styrene here, and you can see this. Maybe you can see this if it'll focus. You'll see that I have the top of my distributor, I have all the holes. So I am going to start making my distributor, and it's a little time consuming, but I like the results. I'm able to run the wires really well, and so I've got that. I want to get this glued on to the top so it's centered, so we can put the wires through. So I just take some spare wires and I run them through here so that I get a nice even tight fit on the top of the distributor here. Well, I've always got some spare wires laying around, so try to run them through so I can get this centered, maybe. There we go. So I run a few wires through here. Run the coil wire through. And I was noticing on this kit that it doesn't seem to have a coil that I can find. So I might have to fabricate a coil for this model. So, alright, so one more wire through here. I hope. Boy, I'm getting old. Alright. I get the wires through the template here. And no matter what color wire you're using, gray, black, yellow, red, doesn't matter. I'm just going to put these down the tube, and that'll help this piece stay centered on that. And then I'm going to take the, so I've got that, and we just try to make sure that stays centered over that so all your wires will fit down in there. And now we've got the start of our distributor. After this dries, and we're going to get to sanding and forming this so it actually looks like a distributor. And that'll be the next step as soon as this dries. Alright, I went ahead and shaped this up. We have the start of the distributor, and now we need to cut it to the right height. So I'm going to line up the kit distributor and this, and we're going to make a cut in this so that it'll be the right height when you put it in on the model. So I want to say right about there should give me my size of my distributor. So I made a little mark there with the knife. Pull these out so I don't cut those. And now I'm going to, let's widen that out a little bit so you can see that. We're going to find that line I made, and we're going to make a nice straight cut right down through the tubing. Light pressure here, little roll to get it started, and there we go, and right down through that. So there we have our start of our distributor. Now after this is done, okay, you might sand up the bottom of this a little bit. Just take a nice sanding stick and square that up. Okay. And now we're going to glue another tube inside this slightly. So I've got another tube here, okay, and it fits right inside that. So now we can make the distributor. Looks like I've got to square that up a little bit more. I want to make sure everything's pretty square on this, so since you're taking your time, just want to make sure that you get this nice and flat so everything looks good. Alright, so now we're going to take the other tube, we're going to go inside this a little bit. Now the trick with this is that hole is not as big, so the wires have got to fit in that. Okay, so you want to run your wires. In here again. You want to run about 4 outside wires through your distributor so that you can get this centered up nicely. Can't see. Let's get some other wire here that actually is a little better for this. So run your wires through here, hopefully. I'm going to run these wires through. So now this will help center this up, so I'm going to run these through like this. I'm going to thread them down inside this tube here. Whoops, wrong end. So I'm going to thread these down inside this tube so that I get a nice fit. Okay, that'll help me keep it centered again on the tube so that I can put my wires all the way through. Easier to glue. Well, back to the plastic cement here, and we're going to run just a little bead around this. Good. And we're going to get that centered on there. Okay. And we're going to let that dry real good. Might need a teeny bit more, just to get that plastic to melt together. So let's make sure it's straight. And once it's straight and the wires are in there, we let that dry. We'll do a little bit more sanding, but then we're going to get into really making this the size and making it look right and getting the wires in it. So we'll let that dry real good and we'll be back.